In 2012, right as adults were, really starting to celebrate the ultimate productivity of the smartphone era.
Oh yeah, when we finally had like email and maps just seamlessly loaded into our pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right at that moment, emergency room visits for preteens and teenagers
Mm-hmm.
started doing something absolutely terrifying.
Truly terrifying.
Across the U.S. and then pretty quickly across the entire developed world, the lines on these graphs tracking anxiety, severe depression, and self-harm among the young, they didn't just tick upward.
No, they do.
They went vertical. I mean, they formed an absolute cliff.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is, well, it's a demographic anomaly that we almost never see in sociological data.
Right.
Usually cultural shifts are really slow. A trend takes a decade to emerge, maybe another decade to solidify.
Sure.
But this was instantaneous. Within a maybe a 3 to 5 year window, the foundational mental health of an entire generation basically fractured.
And what we are untangling today for you listening is the mechanics behind that fracture. We are taking a big step away from the, breathless, utopian hype surrounding new technologies.
The tech bro hype.
Yeah, exactly. We are looking at this brewing collision, this massive slow-motion impact between rapid AI advancement and just fundamental human development.
It's a collision we really can't ignore anymore.
We can't. And our stack of sources for today is dense. We're drawing really heavily from an extensive interview with social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, specifically his research in the anxious generation.
Which is such an important piece of work right now.
Totally. And we are placing that alongside insights from corporate HR executives like Cassandra Pratt from Progeny and the perspectives of global economic leaders speaking at the World Economic Forum.
The contrast between those sources is really what makes this so illuminating, honestly.
It really does.
Because you have the corporate economic view of technology, which is relentlessly focused on efficiency, just removing all the friction.
Get it done faster.
Right. But then you have the developmental psychological view, which argues that friction is, well, it's the literal bedrock of human growth.
And the stakes for this deep dive, they really could not be higher. We are focusing intensely on this current attention crisis, how the digital ecosystem has completely rewired our kids, and the critical interventions we have to make to help the next generation do the tough stuff.
The tough stuff. Yeah, that's the key phrase.
Because as we're going to explore, the tough stuff is what builds resilient humans.
Yeah.
So as we get into this, I want to pose a paradox directly to you listening.
Think about this one carefully.
Yeah, think about this as we go through the evidence. What if the very technology that makes an adult so effortlessly productive, the tools streamlining your workday, summarizing your emails, what if that is simultaneously destroying a child's ability to develop into a capable human being?
I mean, to understand how we arrived at this paradox with AI, we really have to look at the immediate precedent.
The history here.
Exactly. The current crisis, this total fragmentation of attention, it didn't start with ChatGPT.
No.
Or generative AI. We have to look at the architectural foundation that was laid down during a very specific, highly disruptive 5-year window.
Between 2010 and 2015.
Right. Society basically underwent this fundamental migration. We moved our collective consciousness onto smartphones and algorithmically driven social media.
And the data Haidt presents from that migration is where we see that vertical cliff we mentioned. Gen Z, so basically anyone born after 1995, they hit adolescence exactly as this migration completed.
Right, at the most vulnerable time.
Yeah, and suddenly you have spiking rates of anxiety, you have crippling depression, and you have that tragic, sharp rise in self-harm.
And, it's very easy for a certain generation to just look at this and say, well, kids these days are soft.
Oh, you hear that all the time.
Right. Or phones are just bad.
Yeah.
But that completely dismisses the biological reality of what happened.
Okay, let's unpack this. What actually happened biologically?
Well, Silicon Valley essentially ran an unchecked global neurobiological experiment on human children.
Just a massive experiment with no oversight.
None. And they ran it in 2 distinct phases, targeting the 2 most vulnerable windows of brain development.
Okay, phase 1.
Let's look at early childhood. We essentially handed toddlers iPads. We took children in their early developmental years, a time when their brains biologically require physical spatial interaction to map reality.
Right, to learn how the world works.
Exactly. And we swapped that 3-dimensional physical world for a 2-dimensional piece of glass.
I mean, the mechanics of that are so important because the difference between a physical toy and an iPad isn't just about, screen time limits.
It's about the actual sensory input the brain gets.
Right. When a toddler plays with wooden blocks, they are actively learning physics.
Yeah, they feel the gravity.
The texture, the weight, they have to use their vestibular system to balance themselves.
And fine motor skills to actually stack the blocks without knocking them over.
Exactly. And if the tower falls, they experience this micro-frustration. They have to sit there and figure out how to rebuild it.
Because the brain is actively building spatial awareness. It's understanding cause and effect in a physical environment.
But then you replace those wooden blocks with an app.
Right, an app where a toddler simply swipes a finger on a flat screen to make a digital block move.
So easy.
Too easy. You are severing the connection between physical action and physical consequence. The visual cortex is highly stimulated, of course, by the bright colors and the fast movement.
But everything else is starving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The motor cortex and the spatial mapping centers of the brain are essentially getting nothing.
And hate sources show the downstream effects of this starvation. I mean, we see documented rises in developmental delays.
Severe language delays, too?
Yeah, and foundational attentional problems by the time they get to school. We basically put their cognitive development in a cast.
That's a great way to put it.
Like if you put a perfectly healthy arm in a cast for 2 years, the muscle just atrophies. By removing the physical friction of the real world, we caused early childhood cognitive atrophy.
And what's wild is that was just phase 1.
This is the beginning.
Phase 2 is where the damage becomes truly exponential. Because after the iPad phase, these same kids reach 7, 8 years old, or the dawn of puberty.
A huge developmental milestone.
Right. Puberty is a period of massive synaptic pruning and neurological rewiring. The brain becomes uniquely plastic, specifically in the areas related to social mapping.
Figuring out who's who.
Yes. Adolescents are biologically driven to figure out where they fit in the social hierarchy, who their allies are, and how to navigate social risk.
And right at that exact moment of maximum neurological vulnerability, what did we do? We placed them onto algorithmic engagement loop.
Platforms like TikTok or Instagram.
Right. We dropped them into the deep end.
We place them into environments that operate on variable ratio reinforcement schedules.
Okay, wait. Explain that term for people who might not know it.
Sure. This is the mechanism B.F. Skinner discovered in the mid-20th century. If you put a rat in a box...
The famous Skinner box.
Right, the Skinner box. You give it a pellet of food every single time it presses a lever. It will press the lever when it's hungry, and then it will just stop.
Makes sense. It's full.
But if you give it a pellet randomly, so sometimes after 1 press, sometimes after 20 presses, sometimes not at all, the rat goes crazy.
It just keeps pressing it.
It will obsessively press the lever until it literally collapses from exhaustion.
Wow. Because the unpredictability creates a dopamine surge.
Precisely. And people misunderstand dopamine. Dopamine isn't actually the chemical of pleasure. It's the chemical of anticipation, of motivation.
So it's about the chase.
Yes. When a 12-year-old pulls down to refresh a social media feed, they have no idea what they're going to get.
It's a slot machine.
It is literally a slot machine in their pocket. It might be a boring ad, or it might be a highly engaging, socially validating video of their friends. That unpredictability completely hijacks the developing brain.
It captures their attention and just holds them prisoner.
It holds them to an engagement loop, completely bypassing the messy, awkward, physical, social experiences that puberty is supposed to force them through.
I mean, think about the scale of this. We took the neighborhood playground, the place where you learn to scrape your knee, where you negotiate the rules of a game with other kids.
Where you get into a fight and have to fix it.
Right. You get into a dispute and figure out how to resolve it without an adult stepping in.
Yeah.
We took that away, and we replaced it with a multi-billion-dollar engagement engine designed by behavioral psychologists optimizing for time on device.
Yeah, and we did it with zero regulatory oversight. This is a point the sources just hammer home over and over.
It's honestly unbelievable when you think about it in any other context.
Right. If a physical toy company manufactured a tricycle with a defective brake and it resulted in a dozen children breaking their arms...
Oh, the societal response would be immediate.
Exactly. There would be product recalls, there would be congressional hearings.
Massive class action lawsuits.
The company would be destroyed. But social media is a consumer product used by almost all children globally, and there is zero legislation in the US restricting this access based on developmental age.
Zero. And these companies have never faced a jury trial for product liability, despite a documented statistical reality of thousands of youths suffering severe psychological harm.
They operate in a completely unprecedented regulatory blind spot.
Yeah, they do.
The legal architecture, specifically Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in the U.S., shields them from liability for what third parties post.
Right, the whole "we're just a platform, not a publisher" argument.
Exactly. But the argument shifting now, which is so important, is that the algorithm itself, the recommendation engine that serves up that variable ratio reinforcement we talked about, that is the product.
And that product is defective by design when you hand it to a child.
Defective and dangerous.
So to truly grasp why this specific algorithmic environment is so uniquely damaging to human mental health, we have to kind of look under the hood of human happiness itself.
We need to understand what actually constructs a flourishing life.
Which Haidt breaks down beautifully in his earlier work, The Happiness Hypothesis. He tackles the two biggest misconceptions we have as a society about happiness.
Yeah, the first misconception is just the default modern view, right? That happiness comes from external acquisition. Stuff. It's the belief that if you acquire enough material prosperity, if you get the promotion, buy the fancy car.
Have access to endless, frictionless entertainment on your phone.
Right, that you will reach this state of permanent satisfaction.
But evolutionary biology totally prevents that. We have the hedonic treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill is so real. Evolution didn't design us to be happy. It designed us to survive and reproduce.
Right.
If an early hominid ate a great meal and then just sat under a tree in a state of permanent bliss forever, they would be eaten by a predator. Or they'd starve the very next week.
They wouldn't pass on their genes.
Exactly. We are wired to experience a burst of pleasure when we achieve a goal, but then our baseline resets incredibly quickly. We adapt to the new luxury, and it just becomes the new normal.
You run faster just to stay in the exact same place.
So material wealth and endless digital entertainment can never fundamentally satisfy us.
So external acquisition fails. But then Haidt also challenges the other extreme, which is the ancient Stoic view, or, the purely ascetic view.
Right, the idea that happiness comes entirely from within.
Yeah, that if you just detach from the world, if you meditate perfectly and just control your internal reactions to external events, you'll find total peace.
And look, the internal approach is highly useful for emotional regulation.
For sure.
But Haidt's synthesis of modern psychology reveals that ultimate human flourishing doesn't come purely from within either. A person sitting alone in an empty room, perfectly regulating their emotions, they're still lacking fundamental human requirements.
Because Haidt argues that happiness comes from between.
From between, yes. It is constructed in the space between yourself and the world.
Okay, let's break down what that space looks like.
Specifically, he identifies 3 foundational relationships you absolutely have to get right. First, the relationship between yourself and your work.
Meaning you have to feel productive.
Productive, useful, and capable of actually applying your skills to overcome a challenge.
Okay, that's one.
Second is the relationship between yourself and others. And this means deep, supportive, face-to-face human connections, not just superficial online acquaintances.
Followers.
Definitely not followers. And third, the relationship between yourself and something larger than yourself.
A meaning system.
Right.
That could be religion. It could be a really deep commitment to a community, a shared civic project, or just a philosophical framework that connects your individual life to a broader narrative.
Work, others, and meaning. Those are the 3.
Work, others, and meaning. And when you evaluate our current digital ecosystem through the lens of those 3 pillars, it's pretty bleak.
Yeah.
You realize that the smartphone and the algorithmic feed actively dismantle all of them.
They really do. Let's trace that out. The technology isolates us into individual pods.
Right.
We are physically alone, sitting on our couches, consuming highly gripping, visually stunning streams of endless entertainment.
But we aren't actually engaging in meaningful work or overcoming any physical challenges.
And we certainly aren't experiencing the neurochemical reality of face-to-face connection, which biologically requires eye contact, physical touch, and reading microexpressions.
You can't get that through a screen.
You can't. And our shared sense of meaning, that has been completely shattered by algorithmic echo chambers that fracture reality into millions of bespoke, personalized feeds.
We are just being fed a diet of pure external stimulation while our between relationships essentially starve to death.
It's a really dangerous setup.
I want to push on this concept of the relationship with work for a second, because the sources bring us right to the edge of a massive brewing debate about the future of AI.
All the UBI debate?
Yes. Whenever you talk to technologists or economists about AI automating human labor, the concept of universal basic income UBI almost immediately enters the chat.
Always.
And the utopian pitch is that AI will do all the rote work, it will generate immense global wealth, and governments will simply distribute a monthly stipend to every citizen.
The idea being that nobody will actually have to work to survive.
Exactly. But from a macroeconomic perspective, UBI solves the problem of resource distribution. It ensures people can buy food and shelter.
Sure.
But Haidt issues a very dark warning about this scenario from a psychological perspective. He argues that giving people money without providing the structure and friction of meaningful work is a guaranteed recipe for mass meaninglessness.
Mass meaninglessness. But let me play devil's advocate here for a minute.
Please do.
Isn't that a highly cynical view of human nature? Like, if you free people from soul-crushing mundane jobs, if they don't have to scan groceries for 8 hours a day or sit at a desk filling out spreadsheets, wouldn't they use that freedom to write novels?
Right, to create art.
Or raise their children with more presence, volunteer in their communities, and just build that meaning themselves? Why do we immediately assume they'll just collapse into meaninglessness?
It's a really fair challenge. And look, there is a subset of highly self-directed people who would absolutely use that freedom to create and contribute.
The self-starters.
Yeah. But Haidt looks at the aggregate sociological data, particularly concerning young men. When the absolute necessity of contribution is removed, the historical and psychological data suggests that the vast majority of people do not spontaneously become Renaissance artists.
They don't just start painting the Sistine Chapel.
No, they follow the path of least resistance.
And right now, the path of least resistance is incredibly steep, and it is incredibly slippery.
So it's a water slide.
Exactly. Because if you have an environment engineered by the world's smartest technologists to offer infinite frictionless pleasure, we're talking hyper-realistic video games, infinite streaming content, algorithmic pornography, and you remove the forcing function of work. Human biology just defaults to the supernormal stimuli.
We are biologically wired to conserve energy.
If we don't have to struggle, generally speaking, we won't. Haidt predicts a future where millions of people, stripped of any defined societal purpose, will simply plug themselves into digital stimulation just to numb the underlying emptiness.
It's a very specific kind of dystopia. We usually imagine the future going wrong in a George Orwell 1984 scenario.
Right, the boot stamping on a human face forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Authoritarian governments inflicting pain, surveilling every move, crushing the human spirit through pure physical force.
But the UBI and AI scenario aligns much more closely with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah, Huxley had a totally different fear. He feared that we wouldn't be controlled by pain, but by pleasure.
That we would be controlled by our addiction to convenience.
We would literally amuse ourselves to death.
We just sit in our climate-controlled pods, completely comfortable, completely entertained, receiving our basic income, and yet utterly devoid of human flourishing.
Because we have no friction, no struggle, and no between.
It's chilling when you think about how close we are to that.
So for you listening right now, take a second and evaluate your own environment. Think about your habits over just the last week.
Be honest with yourself.
Yeah. How often did your devices actually facilitate a deeper connection to purposeful work or to a profound, complicated human relationship?
Versus how often did they act as an isolating pod, trapping you in a frictionless scroll of pure consumption?
It's a tough question to answer.
It is. And here is the terrifying pivot point in our sources. The smartphone era, which caused this massive spike in anxiety and isolation, that was just a primitive precursor.
It was just the appetizer.
Exactly. What happens when artificial intelligence has a force that is infinitely more capable of predicting our desires, mimicking human interaction, and removing friction? What happens when that enters this developmental equation?
This brings us to the massive contradiction in our source material. There is basically a schizophrenic split in how we view AI for adults versus how we view it for children.
Okay, let's look at the adult perspective first, because it is overwhelmingly optimistic.
Oh, totally. In the World Economic Forum discussions, corporate HR executives like Cassandra Pratt from Progeny, they view AI as the ultimate liberator.
Pratt talks about AI entirely through the lens of efficiency and eliminating rote tasks.
The busy work.
Right. The data entry, the endless scheduling emails, the repetitive coding. She argues that by automating all these things, adult workers are freed up to operate at the absolute top of their intelligence.
She uses this phrase, working to the top of your license.
I like that phrase.
Me too.
Yeah.
The idea is that if you are a highly trained physician, you shouldn't be spending 40% of your day typing billing codes into an electronic health record system.
And AI can just listen to the patient encounter and generate the notes instantly.
Exactly. You should be spending your time doing what only a human can do, complex diagnostic problem solving, providing actual empathy, reading the emotional state of the patient, connecting dots across disciplines.
And for an adult whose brain is already fully formed, whose prefrontal cortex is fully myelinated, and who has already spent decades building their cognitive architecture, removing rote friction allows them to scale their impact.
It makes him a much more effective generalist.
Yes, but, and this is a massive but, we cannot apply that same corporate efficiency logic to human development.
No, we really can't.
When we pivot to children, the narrative completely inverts. The removal of friction, which is highly profitable for a 40-year-old professional, is absolutely catastrophic for a 10-year-old child.
Because a child is not just a miniature adult.
No, their brains are actively under construction, and the raw material used to build cognitive architecture, resilience, and executive function, that raw material is friction.
They literally must do the tough stuff.
They need the rote tasks.
Exactly. The rote tasks are not busy work for a child. They are the scaffolding of the mind.
Right.
When a 12-year-old is assigned to read a dense book and write a 5-page essay, the goal is not merely the production of the final essay.
Nobody needs another middle school essay on To Kill a Mockingbird.
Exactly. The goal is the cognitive struggle required to produce it.
Think about what happens neurologically during that process. First, they have to sit down and focus, which builds attention stamina.
Then they stare at a blank page and experience intense frustration.
Yes. And they have to tolerate that frustration without quitting, which builds emotional regulation.
They have to synthesize different ideas, wrestling with syntax and logic.
Which builds actual neural pathways.
But then AI comes along, and it whispers to that child, hey, take a shortcut. Don't sit with that frustration. I'll read the book, I'll summarize the themes, and I will write a perfectly structured essay for you in about 3 seconds.
And if the child takes that shortcut, and of course they will, because human nature always seeks the path of least resistance, they bypass the entire cognitive workout.
It goes right back to that cast analogy.
Right. If AI acts as an intellectual cast, carrying the entire load of synthesis and logic, the child's ability to think critically, to adapt, and to tolerate distress will simply atrophy.
Haidt argues that children need to face and overcome hard things thousands of times to build a functional adult brain.
Thousands of times. And if AI removes the thousands of micro-struggles, we are going to produce adults who are incredibly cognitively brittle.
And we can extrapolate this far beyond just academic homework. I mean, the implications for social and emotional development are even more profound.
They really are. Haidt projects a very near future where children grow up interacting constantly with AI chatbots.
Companions.
Yeah, AI companions designed to be their absolute best friends, their tutors, and eventually artificial romantic partners.
And the hidden danger there is that these AI companions are perfectly customized.
They are flawlessly agreeable. Think about it. An AI companion never gets tired.
It never gets bored of your stories.
It never has a bad day and snaps at you for no reason. It learns your exact psychological preferences and molds itself entirely to your desires.
It provides the perfect simulation of intimacy and connection with absolutely zero of the friction.
Yeah. But real human relationships are entirely built on friction. They are inherently messy.
Yeah, when you interact with another human, there are constant micro-ruptures and repairs.
Right. You say something insensitive,
Your friend gets hurt.
you have to read their body language to realize, oh, wait, I messed up.
You have to swallow your pride, apologize, and actually negotiate a repair.
And that cycle of rupture and repair is exactly how you learn empathy.
It is how you develop the psychological calluses required to exist in a society.
If you grow up with an AI best friend who just caters to your every whim, who never challenges you or requires you to compromise, you will never develop the capacity for rupture and repair.
So what happens when that child eventually tries to date a real human being?
They will find real humans utterly exhausting.
Too much work.
Way too much work. They will find them unpredictable, disappointing, overly demanding. I mean, why would you do the hard, painful work of sustaining a relationship with a flawed human when you have a perfectly tailored digital companion just waiting for you on your phone?
We are looking at the potential for a massive withdrawal from human social life.
We really are. Yeah.
So if AI functions as the ultimate helicopter parent, doing their homework, smoothing out every social interaction, anticipating every need before the child even registers it, how do these kids ever develop the muscles to survive the chaotic, uncontrollable real world?
The chilling answer in the sources is they won't. They will be extraordinarily fragile.
But we don't have to guess if this will happen. We are already seeing the leading edge of it in the anxiety and fragility statistics generated by just the smartphone era.
Right.
AI is just going to act as an accelerant on an already burning fire.
Now, naturally, when we discuss this, our protective instincts kick in hard.
Of course.
We focus entirely on the youth. We say we have to lock down the schools, we have to save the kids.
Right. It's always about the kids.
But as we dive deeper into the sources, a highly uncomfortable truth emerges. The adults, the parents, the teachers, the policymakers who are supposed to be guiding these kids through this digital minefield, they have fundamentally lost control of their own minds.
This was a deeply fascinating realization Haidt had after publishing The Anxious Generation. I mean, he wrote the book intending to diagnose and treat adolescent mental health.
Yeah, he thought it was a teen problem.
But as he went on tour, speaking to hundreds of audiences, he was continuously approached by adults in their 30s, 40s, 50s who confessed, it's not just my kids, it's happening to me.
The adults are suffering from a profound, largely unacknowledged attention crisis of their own. The rewiring of the brain hasn't spared anyone.
Haidt points out that adults are rapidly losing the ability to sustain deep focus.
It's so true. They are finding it increasingly difficult to just sit down on a Sunday afternoon and read a physical book for 2 hours.
Oh, I struggle with that now.
We all do. There is emerging research suggesting that adults are struggling with basic reading comprehension, like unable to read a single paragraph of dense, nuanced text and successfully answer questions about it shortly after.
Because our attention spans have been shattered into a million tiny fragments.
And neurologically, it makes complete sense. We live in a state of continuous partial attention.
Always waiting for the next ping.
Right. If you are constantly checking notifications, constantly context switching between email, Slack, a news feed, text messages, you are keeping your brain's arousal system constantly triggered.
You literally unlearn the cognitive habit of sustaining a single, deep, unbroken thought.
You exhaust your executive function, and this shattered individual attention has a massive cascading effect on the macro level of society. It's not just that we can't read a novel, it's that we can no longer communicate effectively with each other as citizens.
Because the architecture of our communication has completely changed. Historically, deep trust and nuance were built through private, face-to-face communications.
But today, the vast majority of our discourse has been moved onto performative, public social media platforms.
You are no longer having a conversation with your neighbor over the backyard fence.
No. You are performing your opinions for an invisible audience of thousands.
And your success in that performance is measured in real time by likes, retweets, and algorithmic reach.
And the algorithms that govern that reach, they do not optimize for nuance.
They don't care about compromise.
They definitely don't care about deep understanding. They optimize for engagement. And human psychology dictates that the highest engagement emotions are outrage, fear, and tribal indignation.
Which brings us to the political polarization analyzed in the source material. Haidt observes that this algorithmic environment has essentially weaponized our evolutionary tribalism.
It's caused both ends of the political spectrum to become increasingly extreme and heavily focused on identitarianism.
And just to be super clear here for everyone listening, we are entirely just reporting Haidt's diagnosis from the sources impartially. We are taking a side here.
Right, this is just what the research shows.
Exactly. He diagnoses that the left has become increasingly focused on identity and maintaining rigid purity tests regarding language and social issues.
Yes.
And simultaneously, the right has become increasingly extreme, focusing heavily on its own forms of identity politics, populism, and grievance narratives.
The tribal trench warfare is completely algorithmically fueled. You are constantly shown the absolute worst, most extreme examples of the other side.
Which naturally convinces you that half the country is not just politically wrong, but existentially evil.
And a society simply cannot function if it cannot agree on a basic shared reality. or if it views its own population as a literal threat to survival.
It is a fundamental threat to the machinery of liberal democracy.
It is. And to survive this environment, to not let our democracies tear themselves apart, we desperately need new interpersonal skills. The old ways of debating are broken.
Which is where the sources highlight Haight's incredibly practical work with the Constructive Dialogue Institute.
The Institute focuses on teaching people how to navigate conversations across deep moral and political divides without triggering that primal fight or flight response.
Okay, let's make this concrete for the listener. Let's role play this a bit.
Sure.
Imagine you are sitting at a Thanksgiving table. You're sitting across from a relative, let's say an uncle, who is from the complete opposite end of the political spectrum as you.
We all have that uncle.
We do. He brings up a highly charged political topic and says something that makes your blood absolutely boil.
Your instinct is to immediately attack his conclusion.
Yes, to hit him with facts and statistics to prove he is an absolute idiot.
Which, neurologically, will instantly cause him to dig in his heels, flood his system with cortisol, and prepare for combat. You will change zero minds.
So what is the actual psychological playbook to navigate that? The Constructive Dialogue Institute offers a specific two-step method to disarm that war mentality.
Step 1. You must start with genuine curiosity.
And that word genuine is the absolute linchpin.
It really is. It cannot be a condescending setup.
Right, you don't ask a trap question.
Instead of attacking the conclusion, you pivot to the foundation. You say, that's a really strong perspective. Help me understand why you feel so deeply about that. What life experiences led you to hold that view?
You are shifting the conversation from a debate about facts where everyone thinks they are right to an exploration of moral foundations.
Exactly. When you ask someone why they believe something, you often uncover a core moral driver. Maybe their view is rooted in a deep fear of societal instability.
Or maybe it's rooted in a profound desire to protect the vulnerable.
Even if you vehemently disagree with their political conclusion, uncovering their moral driver allows you to see them as a human being operating from a place of perceived morality.
Rather than just an evil cartoon character fed to you by an algorithm.
Right. Okay, so you ask the genuine question, and they explain their underlying fear or value. Then comes step 2, which is arguably the hardest thing to do in human communication.
Oh, it really is. Step 2 is acknowledge something they are right about.
That feels impossible in the heat of the moment.
It feels like you are conceding defeat, like you are giving up your own moral high ground.
It feels like surrender, but it is actually the most powerful psychological tool you possess. In almost any complex, deeply held political worldview, there is a kernel of truth.
There is a valid concern buried under all the rhetoric.
Right. If your uncle is expressing an extreme view on the economy, and you can listen closely enough to find the underlying anxiety, you can authentically say, you know what, Uncle John? You are absolutely right to be concerned about the cost of living for working-class families. That is a real problem.
And what happens when you do that?
It works absolute magic on human psychology. It immediately disarms their defensive posture. The moment you validate a kernel of their truth, they stop seeing you as an enemy combatant.
It signals, I respect you, I am listening to you, and this is a shared exploration, not a zero-sum war.
And only after you have established that baseline of mutual respect can you introduce your own perspective without it being immediately rejected.
It's the only way to open a locked door.
Yeah.
But here is the brutal catch-22 that we arrive at in the sources.
Yeah.
We can talk about these elegant communication strategies all day long, but we cannot implement them, we cannot save our civil discourse, and we certainly cannot guide our children through the AI revolution if our own brains are still fundamentally addicted to the very devices causing the fracture.
We cannot solve the macro problems of society if we have completely lost control of our own micro habits of attention.
Which means this requires immediate, decisive behavioral intervention. We have to change how we live.
And the timeline the sources give us is incredibly urgent.
Yeah, Haight issues a dire warning. We do not have a decade to slowly figure this transition out. We have maybe 1 year.
1 year.
We have an incredibly brief window to radically raise our consciousness and change our habits before the next generation of highly capable, deeply integrated AI becomes the ubiquitous background radiation of our lives and our children's lives.
The window to act is closing rapidly. And Haight structures the necessary interventions into 2 distinct categories. The macro solutions, which require systemic change, and the micro solutions, which are entirely within our personal control.
Okay, let's start with the macro. What do governments, institutions, and schools actually need to do?
On a systemic level, governments must finally hold tech companies legally accountable.
It's about time.
The governing philosophy needs to shift to you break it, you fix it. If an algorithmic platform causes documented statistical harm to the mental health of minors, the company must be liable.
But legislation takes years.
And we don't have years. So Haidt argues passionately for cultural and institutional shifts to protect childhood through the end of puberty.
What does that look like practically?
It looks like aggressive collective action. We need to keep children under the age of 14 and potentially 16 entirely off algorithmic, engagement-based platforms.
Just a hard line.
Yes. We have to give their frontal lobes and their social mapping systems a chance to wire themselves in the messy, physical, real world before we subject them to the digital casino.
And this means schools adopting strict phone-free policies during the entire school day.
Not just in class. During lunch and breaks, too, so kids are forced to actually talk to each other.
It is essentially treating social media algorithms with the exact same developmental caution and age gating that we use for tobacco, alcohol, or operating a motor vehicle.
You have to be biologically mature enough to handle the substance.
Precisely. But while we wait for that systemic change, we have to take immediate, radical control of our own personal digital hygiene.
Which brings us to the micro level.
And this is where Haidt's approach is totally uncompromising. As a professor, he refuses to let his college students work on high-level philosophical concepts of happiness or societal flourishing until they address their foundational attention spans.
Because he notes that many of his students are spending 4 to 7 hours a day on social media.
I mean, think about the magnitude of that. 4 to 7 hours a day is essentially a full-time job.
It is a massive chunk of their waking life, their prime creative energy, spent sitting stationary on a bed, swiping their thumb.
It is a profound, tragic waste of human potential.
So what are the practical daily interventions to reclaim that potential? The sources detail a few specific, highly effective exercises.
And I want you, the listener, to seriously consider implementing these today.
The first one is called the first 5, last 5 exercise.
This functions as a diagnostic tool for your own cognitive autonomy. Haidt challenges people to physically write down the first 5 actions they take when they open their eyes in the morning and the last 5 actions they take before they close their eyes at night.
And let's be brutally honest here.
Right.
For the vast majority of adults in the modern world, blindly reaching over to the nightstand, grabbing the phone, and checking notifications is action number 1 on both lists.
Guilty as charged, honestly.
We all do it. And Haidt points out the terrifying neurobiological reality of that habit. The moment you wake up, your brain is transitioning from theta waves to alpha waves. It is highly suggestible and highly vulnerable.
So if the very first thing you do is look at a screen filled with emails, news alerts, or social media feeds,
you are immediately injecting high-stress, high-dopamine algorithmic content into a fragile system. Your phone now dictates your cognition, your priorities, and your baseline anxiety level for the rest of the day.
you have surrendered the framing of your reality to an algorithm before your feet even hit the floor.
You aren't setting your own intentions. You are merely reacting to whatever the slot machine decided to serve you.
So the necessary intervention is to fiercely protect those first and last moments of the day, which seamlessly leads to the second micro-solution, the physical touch rule.
The sources share an incredible, visceral anecdote about a man who realized just how deeply his attention had been hijacked, and he forced a behavioral hard stop.
He implemented a strict non-negotiable rule.
Right. The very first action he took every single morning had to involve touching something alive.
Not a cold, dead piece of glass.
Exactly. It had to be physical contact with biological life. It meant picking up his baby from the crib. It meant hugging his spouse, or at the very least, petting his dog.
He forced his brain to anchor into the physical, three-dimensional, living world,
Releasing oxytocin and grounding his nervous system before he allowed the frantic, two-dimensional digital world to intrude. It is a profound, simple way of reestablishing to your own brain what is actually real and what fundamentally matters.
That is so powerful. And the third practical intervention addresses the reality that we still have to live in the modern world. I mean, we can't all just throw our phones in the ocean.
As much as we might want to.
Right. We might need certain apps for work or to maintain specific long-distance connections. But the intervention is about removing the slot machine from your pocket.
Haidt's rule is simple but brutal. You move the addictive apps off your phone. You delete Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or whatever your specific vice is from the mobile device.
And you relegate those platforms exclusively to a desktop or laptop computer.
Exactly.
But let's test that, because people always resist this. They say, why can't I just use a screen time limiter? Why can't I just tell myself I'll only use Twitter for 15 minutes a day while I drink my coffee? Why the absolute deletion from the phone?
Because conscious willpower is a myth in this specific context.
A myth.
You are bringing a psychological knife to a supercomputer gunfight.
Oh, wow. That's a good way to put it.
These apps were literally engineered by thousands of the smartest behavioral psychologists and data scientists on Earth. They are armed with billions of data points optimizing for your exact neurological vulnerabilities.
So when you are tired or stressed or bored, your prefrontal cortex, your willpower center, is completely depleted.
And you will automatically reach for the dopamine hit in your pocket. Your conscious willpower is simply overmatched by the environmental design.
As the behavioral economics saying goes, we have to change our physical environments if we want to change our mental habits. You have to insert friction between yourself and the addiction.
Exactly. If you want to check the app, you have to physically get up, walk over to a desk, open a laptop, wait for it to wake up, type in a password, and log into a website.
That physical friction, that delay, is almost always enough to break the mindless, compulsive habit of simply reaching into your pocket while waiting in line at the grocery store.
You regain intentionality.
And we must urgently apply this exact same philosophy of environmental design and beneficial friction to our children. We have to force them to engage with the real, difficult world.
The sources reference the Let Grow initiative, which is a movement aimed at reversing the overprotection of childhood.
Over the last 40 years, the physical radius of play, how far a child is allowed to roam from their front door unsupervised, has shrunk to almost zero.
We replace physical independence with digital immersion.
And the Let Grow initiative is about intentionally giving children back the independence to explore their physical neighborhoods.
It requires parents to let their kids walk to the store alone, navigate manageable physical risks, get lost, and find their way back.
To experience failure and build their own competence without constant adult surveillance or digital intervention.
It's about letting them build the cognitive scaffolding they actually need to survive.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's pull all these threads together. The grand overarching paradox we face is that the very friction, the difficulty, the rote tasks, and the messy physical interactions that technology constantly seeks to eliminate from our lives, those are not bugs in the human operating system.
They are the exact raw materials required to build resilient, capable, and deeply happy human beings.
We cannot allow the alluring, seamless convenience of AI to rob us, or our children, of our necessary developmental struggles.
The scraped knees on the playground.
The agonizing frustration of writing a difficult essay.
The awkward, painful apologies required to maintain a friendship.
These are vital features of human growth. We have to consciously, deliberately, and fiercely protect that friction.
Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with, looking toward the horizon. As artificial intelligence continues to accelerate its capabilities, it will relentlessly lower the cost of creating perfection.
Right.
We will soon have perfectly structured instant essays. We will have flawless, stunning art generated in seconds. We will even have perfect, infinitely agreeable digital companions that never challenge us.
As perfection becomes cheap and ubiquitous, the ultimate luxury of the future will no longer be access to cutting-edge technology.
No, it won't. The ultimate luxury of the future will be the capacity to sustain a single, unbroken, difficult human thought. And the ultimate resilience will be the ability to love a flawed, messy, entirely unpredictable, real human being.
Are you protecting that luxury in your own home? Think back to the X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning. The human mind isn't a clean, visible bone that can be simply fixed with a splint or optimized by an algorithm. It is murky, it is complex, and it absolutely requires the friction of the real world to grow strong. I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Please take these insights, evaluate your own environment, and share this conversation with the parents, educators, and anyone in your life who is trying to navigate this chaotic new era.